And then I also sent your parents a reminder message about the book exchange tomorrow evening. So it's from 5 to 7 up at Gotch. You don't have to come the whole time. You can just come in any time between 5 and 7. And just bring a book with you, like a gently used book that you don't need anymore. Maybe you outgrew it, or maybe you just don't read it anymore, so you're done with it, or maybe you have more than one copy of it. So bring a book that you can switch out for another book. So it's just a way for us to recycle books and promote summer reading. So give you something new to read for the summer. Okay. Okay, and you can bring as many books as you want to exchange. So if you have like 2 or 3 books that you want to exchange, bring 2 or 3 and you can exchange them for 2 or 3. So however many books you bring, you can swap out for that many books. Okay. And then a bunch of teachers have donated books too. So if you, I don't know, if you see something else that you want, I'm sure you can take it with you. So encourage lots of reading this summer. Okay. So when we ended, we flash forward a little bit further in their story with Salva because he made it across the river, and then it took him and a group of boys a year and a half to make it to Kenya. So they're going to be in Kenya when we start reading here in just a minute. Okay, this is Naya in 2009 in southern Sudan. For 3 days, the air around Naya's home was filled with the sound of the drill. On the third afternoon, Naya joined the other children gathered around the drill site. The grown-ups rose from their work pounding rocks and drifted over too. The workers seemed excited. They were moving quickly as their leader called out orders. And then, whoosh, a spray of water shot high into the air. This wasn't the water that the workers had been piping into the borehole. This was new water. Water that was coming out of the hole. Everyone cheered at the sight of the water. They all laughed at the sight of the 2 workers who had been operating the drill. They were drenched, their clothes completely soaked. A woman in the crowd began singing a song of celebration. Naya clapped her hands along with all the other children. But as Naya watched the water spraying out of the borehole, she frowned. What do you think she's frowning about?
I have no clue.
So all this water is spraying up from the ground, spraying up from the drill. People are singing and dancing and so happy. And she's watching all this water and she's frowning. What might she be frowning about? Something that we don't often think about. Ruby, what do you think?
Wait, never mind.
I think she might be frowning. She might be frowning about how she was wrong about water not being in the ground.
Okay, maybe she was frowning because she feels like silly, like she was wrong, like she didn't know. Maybe. What do you think, Malia?
Because there's a bunch of water, so maybe she thinks that it's gonna flood.
Oh, okay. So maybe she's worried. Like, what's all this water gonna do? Like, what kind of problem is it gonna cause?
Yeah.
Maybe. How many of you, when you go take a shower, how many of you are limited for how long you can be in the shower? Oh, okay. So parents, do they like set a timer, or do they knock on the door and tell you time's up, or how do you know when to get out?
I'm not limited, but I think I know what you mean. I think I know.
What about how many of you are only allowed to get like 5 drinks out of your kitchen faucet a day, or 2 drinks out of the faucet? Are you allowed to get as many drinks as you want out of the faucet? Yeah. And then what about washing dishes? If your parents or whoever takes care of the house and cleans up the kitchen, maybe it's you, maybe it's older brother, sister, mom, dad, grandma. When they're cleaning up the kitchen and they're like washing the dishes and cleaning up the mess from dinner or something, do they let the water run while they're cleaning up? They turn it off and on and off and on and off and on. They never let it run. Wow, got some good water conservatives over there. I have sometimes I try to keep it, off as much as I can when I'm cleaning up, but I sometimes tend to let it run when I'm cleaning up until I'm all done cleaning, and then I turn it off. Ruby, what are you thinking now?
I think maybe she thinks it's going to run out.
Okay, yeah, maybe she's worried it's going to run out. Like they're letting all this water just come up and out of the ground. Maybe eventually it's going to run out. Maybe she's disappointed about how wasteful it looks. Like all this water is just running into the ground, like coming up out of the ground and then going back into the ground, not being used for anything. So maybe she's disappointed. Oh, the water wasn't clear. It was brown and heavy looking and full of mud. Ooh, I didn't think about that. So she's bummed. She's like, here we are supposed to be drilling for clean, fresh water so we can have this clean water and not get sick. And the water coming out of the ground is brown and heavy looking and full of mud. So that's why she was frowning. Ifo refugee camp, Kenya, 1992 to 1996, so 4 years. Salva was now 22 years old. For the past 5 years, he had been living in refugee camps in northern Kenya, first at the Kakuma camp and then at Ifo. Kakuma had been a dreadful place, isolated in the middle of a dry, windy desert. Tall fences of barbed wire enclosed the camp. You weren't allowed to leave unless you were leaving for good. It felt almost like a prison. 70,000 people lived at Kakuma. Some said it was more like 80 or 90,000. There were families who had managed to escape together. But again, as in Ethiopia, most of the refugees were orphaned boys and young men. The local people who lived in the area did not like having the refugee camp nearby. They would often sneak in and steal from the refugees. Sometimes fights broke out and people were hurt or killed. So this was not a good place to be. Even though it was supposed to be a place of safety for these people who had nowhere to go, it was not that. It was overcrowded. It felt like a prison. People were stealing from them. Fights were breaking out, and people were getting killed. After 2 years of misery at Kakuma, Salva decided to leave the camp. What does that tell us about Salva? We already know this about him over all these years that we followed him. But he goes to this refugee camp and it's horrible. It's miserable. He hates it. He finally decides to leave. Does he know where he's going? Probably not really.
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, he might have some idea. Ruby, what are you thinking?
He wouldn't just leave for no reason. He would think he would give places a chance, so that means it must have been pretty bad.
Okay, yeah. Like he's not gonna just give up. He's a fighter. He has grit. He's not just gonna give up. So that place must have been pretty bad for him to finally say, you know what, I'm out of here. And then he probably has a plan. Once again, Salva and a few other men started walking. He had heard of another refugee camp far to the south and west, where he hoped things would be better. They walked for months. But when they reached the camp at Ifo, they found that things were no different than at Kakuma. Everyone was always hungry, and there was never enough food. Many were sick or had gotten injured during their long, terrible journeys to reach the camp. The few medical volunteers could not care for everyone who needed help. Salva felt fortunate that at least he was in good health. He wanted desperately to work, to make a little money that he could then use to buy extra food. He even dreamed of saving some money so that one day he could leave the camp and continue his education somehow. So even though all of this is looking so dreadful and so hopeless, he still has these dreams. He has these dreams of finding a job and making some money and maybe going back to school. But there was no work. There was nothing to do but wait. Wait for the next meal, for news of the world outside the camp. The days were long and empty. They stretched into weeks, then months, and then years. It was hard to keep hope alive when there was so little to feed it. So he says there's not much good happening in his life. So it's hard to keep hope alive. What do you think about that? When something is like kind of feels like, oh, nothing good is ever going to happen to me. What do you rely on? Like, what's your go-to? What's your rock that helps build you back up?
I usually say to myself, you can do it.
Okay, so like positive self-talk, like talk to yourself about it. Like, I can do this. I'm going to do this. Okay, that's good. Katie?
I might try to do something else for a little bit and then come back to it so that I know that I can do something. So if I can do that, I can do this as well.
Yeah, that's good. Kind of distract yourself a little bit or try something new, change the direction you're moving in. So maybe like if something isn't working out for you, maybe step away from it, try something new, build that confidence back up. That's good. What else? What else do you guys rely on when you're feeling down? Or you're feeling like something's not going your way? What are your strategies? Who do you go to? Ruby?
I like to talk to friends.
Absolutely, yeah. Adults, we do that too. Like I have a group of moms, girlfriends that I like to spend time with and chit chat with and talk about the good things that are going on in my life, but also sometimes vent a little bit about something that might be bothering me. And then it helps. Roy, what are you thinking?
Pray.
Did you say play?
Pray.
Oh, pray. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. If you are a religious person and you have some faith and some beliefs, yeah, some moments of prayer. And if you're not a religious person, then maybe just some like quiet moments of meditation. So just moments of kind of trying to clear your mind and some breathing and thinking. Yeah, very good. I was also thinking too, like family, like Ruby had mentioned friends and family are kind of your go-to when you're feeling down. They're usually the ones that kind of lift us back up. And pets too. Your pets who love you no matter what, who are always there to cuddle or just be near you. And Salva doesn't have any of this. He doesn't really have any friends. His family, we know, is not with him. He's in this place where he barely has enough to eat, so he probably doesn't have many luxuries. He's been walking. He doesn't have any real true personal belongings. Like sometimes just being with our things make us feel good, like our stuff, our personal stuff. He doesn't have any of that. So he's got to dig deep. Julia says sitting in nature, meditating, listening to the sounds of the outdoors. I agree. It's a calming feeling. Katie says talking to her dog. Yeah, being with your company of your pets. Definitely. There was no work. There was nothing to do but wait. Wait for the next meal. So not even anything for him to really do to kind of take his mind off of things. Because you guys had mentioned like doing other things. He says there's nothing. There's nothing to do but just wait. You just wait from one meal to the next. Waiting for the next meal, for the news of the world outside the camp. The days were long and empty. They stretched into weeks and then months and then years. It was hard to keep hope alive when there was so little to feed it. Michael was an aid worker from a country called Ireland. Salva had met a lot of aid workers. They came and went, staying at the camp for several weeks or at most a few months. The aid workers came from many different countries, but they usually spoke English to each other. Few of the refugees spoke English, so communication with the aid workers was often difficult. But after so many years in the camps, Salva could understand a little English. He even tried to speak it once in a while. And Michael almost always seemed to understand what Salva was trying to say. One day after the morning meal, Michael spoke to Salva. "You seem interested in learning English," he said. "How would you like to learn to read?" The lessons began that very day. Michael wrote down 3 letters on a small scrap of paper. A, B, C, he said, handing the scrap to Salva. A, B, C, Salva repeated. The whole rest of the day, Salva went around saying A, B, C, mostly to himself, but sometimes aloud in a quiet voice. He looked at the paper 100 times and practiced drawing the letters in the dirt with a stick over and over again. Salva remembered learning to read Arabic when he was young. The Arabic alphabet had 28 letters, the English only 26. In English, the letters stayed separate from each other, so it was easy to tell them apart. In Arabic, the letters were always joined, and a letter might look different depending on what came before or after it. "Sure, you're doing lovely," Michael said the day Salva learned to write his own name. "You learn fast because you work hard." So Michael is from Ireland. He speaks English. He's helping Salva learn English, helping Salva learn how to read and write. And Salva's saying he already knows Arabic. And Arabic is much more difficult to learn than English, in Salva's opinion. And so he is kind of thinking in his head, I can do this. I got this. And then
People had different opinions because English in its written form combines thousands of different languages. Well, not thousands, but you get it.
Yeah. But then Michael says to him, "You learn fast because you work so hard." Salva did not say what he was thinking, that he was working hard because he wanted to learn to read English before Michael left the camp. Salva knows that Michael's only going to be there for a short time. So he's kind of thinking in his head, I've got to take advantage of this. I got to learn as much as I can from Michael while I have him. Salva did not know if any of the other aid workers would take the time to teach him. But once in a while, it's good to take a break from work. Let's do something a wee bit different for a change. I'm thinking you're going to be good at this because you are a tall lad. So Salva learned 2 things from Michael: how to read and how to play volleyball. So Michael taught him how to play volleyball because he is so tall. A rumor was spreading through the camp. It began as a whisper, but Salva soon felt as if it were a roar in his ears. What do you think that means? It starts as a whisper, but soon Salva felt like it was a roar in his ears. No one is really yelling in his ears, but what happened to the rumor? Katie?
It kept on expanding.
Yeah, more and more people are talking about it. It's spreading through the camp, okay? So it's like everywhere you go, people are talking about it. He could think of nothing else. America, the United States. The rumor was that about 3,000 boys and young men from the refugee camps would be chosen to go live in America. Salva could not believe it. How could it be true? How would they get there? Where would they live? Surely it was impossible. But as the days went by, the aid workers confirmed the news. It was all anyone could talk about. They only want healthy people. If you are sick, you won't be chosen. They won't take you if you have ever been a soldier with the rebels. Only orphans are being chosen. If you have any family left, you have to stay here. Well, we know Salva's healthy.
He's an orphan too.
We know he's an orphan.
But didn't he work with the rebels?
No, he didn't. He avoided them.
Yeah.
Remember, they were the ones who attacked his uncle. So he's never been a soldier. He's never fought. He's never hurt anyone. So he meets all 3 of those criteria. Why do you think they are saying that they only want healthy people? They don't want any soldiers that have fought with the rebels, and they only want orphans. What about those 3 things? Why?
Africa is notorious for malaria currently.
Yeah.
And bringing a malaria-infected person to the U.S., USA citizens have no natural defense.
Mm-hmm.
Outbreak would be devastating. And when you think about individual states,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mississippi is notorious for mosquitoes.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan.
Those transmit malaria.
Yeah, Jonathan's right on. So they don't want sick people coming into the country and possibly exposing healthy people to something that they aren't familiar with, something that their body wouldn't know how to fight or wouldn't know how to handle. Okay, so that's one of the reasons they only wanted healthy people. Okay, so don't bring any illnesses, don't bring any sickness into our country. What about soldiers? If you fought with the rebels, why do they not want you if you fought with the rebels? Who were the rebels? Jackson?
If you fought with the rebels, you could attack all the other people.
Okay. What were the rebels doing? Who knows?
I'm pretty sure they were trying to overthrow democracy.
Yeah, they were fighting back against the government. So they were kind of like had their own, even though the government there at that time wasn't necessarily making the right choices for the people, they were fighting back. And think about that in our country. Like we have a democracy for a reason. You have a voice in things. You're able to vote and have opinions and feelings about topics. And if we would all get together and like fight back against the government when they say something or make a law or a rule that we don't like or we don't approve of, it would be constant chaos. And then there are people who do it, right? There are people who
The storms on the White House that happened.
Yes. There are people who have made some not good choices over the last few years when it comes to getting their voices heard. And, you know, we talk about peaceful protest and being able to have your voice heard, but in just that, a peaceful manner. So a way that you're not hurting anyone or causing harm or making a dangerous situation for anyone. So these rebels,
And the rebels might have killed American soldiers.
maybe, I think they just wanted to avoid people who were maybe gonna fight back or, you know, be aggressive in some way or something. I don't know. And then the last one definitely absolutely makes sense, right? Orphans. An orphan is someone who has no family. So there were all these boys as little as
family.
as little as 5 years old who had no one to care for them in the country and where they,
6.5.
yeah, and where they were,
Still young.
it was very it was a very poor area where they had very little. So there weren't people there in Kenya that could take in these orphan boys. They weren't able to. They didn't have the means to feed them and to, you know, give them shelter and take care of them.
It might not even just be boys.
Right. We know that at this this camp, there were a lot of boys, but yes, there might have been girls too. Absolutely. Okay. So Salva has this hope that he's going to America, and we know he gets there, right? Weeks pass, then months. One day, a notice was posted at the camp's administration tent. It was a list of names. If your name was on the list, it meant that you had made it to the next step, the interview. After the interview, you might go to America. Salva's name was not on the list, nor was it on the next list or the one after that. So 1, 2, 3 lists Salva had to go and look at, and his name was never on there. Many of the boys being chosen were younger than Salva. Perhaps America doesn't want anyone too old, he thought. Remember, Salva's 22, so he's not a boy, he's a young man. And he's thinking, oh no, maybe they don't want me. What family would want to take a 22-year-old young man into their home? Each time a list was posted, Salva's heart would pound as he read the names. He tried not to lose hope. At the same time, he tried not to hope too much. Sometimes he felt he was being torn in two by the hoping and the not hoping. So he goes every time they post a new list, he goes. Part of him is like, oh, please, I want my name to be there. But then part of him is like, I don't even care anymore. Okay, so he doesn't want to get his hopes up too much, but he also doesn't want to give up. That had to be a tough situation. And here in America, 22 years old, a lot of times you're considered an adult at 22. So you're considered, most kids are finishing, if they go to college or like a trade school or some kind of program, like a continuing ed program, most kids are kind of finishing at around that age of 22, depending on what it is you want to do after school. And then they're starting to, get into the workforce and find their own homes and buy their own cars and all sorts of things like that. So a lot of independence at that age. But here, Salva, he wouldn't be able to do that. He would need someone to guide him, someone to teach him. One windy afternoon, Michael rushed over to Salva's tent. Salva, come quickly. Your name, it's on the list today. Salva leapt to his feet and was running even before his friend had finished speaking. When he drew near the administration tent, he slowed down and tried to catch his breath. He might be wrong. It might be another person named Salva. I'm not going to look too soon. I'm going to go and I'm going to look from far away. I might see a name that looks like mine. I need to be sure. Salva shouldered his way through the crowd until he was standing in front of the list. He raised his head slowly and began reading through the names. There it was. Salva Dude, Rochester, New York. Salva was going to New York. He was going to America. So happy for you. Okay, so Salva's on his way to America. Let's read this one more chapter before I send you off. Chapter 15, Southern Sudan, 2009. Even though the water spraying out of the borehole was brown and muddy, some of the little boys wanted a drink right away, but their mothers held them back. The men kept on working with the drill. Their leader talked to Naya's uncle and father and some of the other village men. Later, Depp explained things to her. Don't worry, he said. The water is muddy because it is still mixed with the old water that they were using from the pond. They have to drill farther down to make sure of getting deep enough into the good, clean water underground. And then they have to put in the pipes and make a foundation with the gravel, and then install the pump and pour cement around it, and the cement has to dry. It would be several more days before they could drink the water. Naya sighed and picked up the big plastic can. Yet another walk to the pond. So he says, it's okay, Naya. It's going to be fine. It's not ready yet. We still need more time with the drill and the pump.
But still, only 1 week. It's only 1 week, not 1 month.
A few more days. She can do it for a few more days. She's been doing it all her life, practically.
Yeah.
Nairobi, Kenya, Rochester, New York, 1996. So he went to Nairobi, to Kenya, to New York, 1996. The Lost Boys. That was what they were being called in America. The boys who had lost their homes and families because of the war and had wandered lost for weeks or months at a time before reaching the refugee camps. The aid worker explained this to Salva and the 8 other boys that he would be traveling with. The woman spoke mostly English. Sometimes she said a word or two in Arabic, but she did not speak that language well. She tried her best to speak slowly, but she had many things to tell them, and Salva worried that he might misunderstand something important. They rode in a truck from the Ifo refugee camp to a processing center in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. Endless forms had to be filled out. Their photos were taken. There was a medical examination. It was all a blur to Salva, for he was too excited to sleep, which made him too tired to grasp everything that was happening. I mean, I'm just trying to picture myself, like if I were on the opposite side of this and I was going to Africa for the first time, and like how I would be feeling as like, oh my gosh, what is it going to look like when I get there? What am I going to see? What is it going to, like, what, I mean, I just don't even know. And like, how am I going to do this and how am I going to do that? And I can't speak the language.
Do you know that elephants associate English with tourists and a certain African language with hunters?
No, I didn't know that.
Because English people go to Africa mostly to take pictures.
Of elephants.
But those other people, they're looking at elephants so that they can calculate where to throw a spear.
Ooh. But there was one clear moment when he was given new clothes. In the camp, he had worn an old pair of shorts, an even older t-shirt. He had taken as good of care of them as he could, but there were holes in the shirt, and the waistband of the shorts were stretched out and threadbare. The camp workers handed out clothing whenever donations came in, but there were never enough clothes for those who needed them. Now Salva's arms were piled high with new clothes. Underwear, socks, sneakers, a pair of long pants, a t-shirt, a long-sleeve shirt to wear on top, and he was to wear all these clothes at the same time. It is winter in America, the aid worker said. Winter? Salva repeated. Yes, very cold. You will be given more clothes in New York. More clothes? Salva shook his head. How can I possibly wear any more clothes? So he's coming from Africa where he barely has anything, never probably really wore shoes. And they're giving him
Oh my
all these,
goodness.
I know, they're giving him all these clothes to put on. And he's like, what? He's like, winter? What is that? Salva could hardly believe his eyes when he boarded the plane in Nairobi. Every person had a seat, and they all had luggage, too. With all those people, hundreds of heavy padded chairs, and all those bags, how would the plane ever get off the ground? Somehow it did. Not like a bird lifting off lightly with a quick flapping of wings, but with shrieks and roars from the engines as the plane lumbered down the long runway as if it had to try as hard as it could to get into the air. Once the plane was safely aloft, Salva stared at the scene outside the small window. The world was so big, yet everything in it was so small. Huge forests and deserts became mere patches of green and brown. Cars crawled along the roads like ants in a line, and there were people down there, thousands of them, but he could not see a single one. Would you like a drink? Salva looked up at the woman in her neat uniform and shook his head to show that he did not understand. How many of you have been on an airplane before? Who is this person asking him if he wants a drink?
A flight attendant.
Yeah, a flight attendant. And he's like, what? Do I want a drink? She smiled. Coca-Cola? Orange juice? Coca-Cola! Long ago, Salva's father had once brought a few bottles of Coca-Cola back from his trip to the market. Salva's first taste had been startling. All those bubbles jumping around in his mouth. What a rare treat it had been. Coca-Cola, thank you, Salva said. And with each sip, he remembered his family passing the bottles from hand to hand, laughing at the tickly bubbles, sharing and laughing together. So he's sitting on the plane, drinking his Coca-Cola, remembering his family and remembering the good times, the laughing. What about this? I mean, what was it? 4 years before this, 5 years before this, he pulled himself out of the Geo River and avoided getting shot and ate by crocodiles, and now he's sitting on a plane to America drinking Coca-Cola? I mean, you guys, anything is possible, right? You never know what tomorrow is going to bring you. You never know what next year is going to bring you. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about Salvador. Like, I can't even. Like, he had a brush with death, like, every other day, basically. Now he's sitting on a plane drinking Coca-Cola.
He's probably
Remembering the good times.
Remembering the good times, Jonathan. That's right. He was still able to find the good times.
I wish there was a way to tell you were in the good old days before you leave the good old days.
I know, right? And then, you know what else I'm thinking about? Here's Salvador going on a plane to America. Okay, he's 22 years old. This is 1996. If I were Salvador and everything that I've read so far, and I finally get on this plane to leave Africa and I'm going to America where I know is nothing like what I just left, I think I would be like, see you later. I'm out of here. But Salva Duke goes back to Africa, you guys. Like a lot. Like I don't even know what, maybe he lives there. Like I don't even know. We need to find that out about him. He goes back and he goes back to help. It's amazing. Okay. The journey to Salva's new home required not one, not two, but 3 planes. And if Samuel's in here, I don't think he is. I didn't see him. But he could tell us about this because his parents just traveled to Africa. Oh, he is in here. His parents just traveled to Africa not too long ago. And his dad went earlier in the year too. So he could tell us all about the plane ride and how long it takes. Because it is a long journey. The first plane flew from Nairobi to Frankfurt in a country called Germany. It landed with an alarming thump, then braked so hard that Salva was thrown forward in his seat. The strap across his stomach caught him hard. He took a second plane from Frankfurt to New York City. It too landed abruptly, but this time Salva was ready, and he held tightly to his armrest. In New York City, the aid worker led the boys to different gates. Some would be making the final leg of their trip alone, while others were in groups of 2 or 3. Salva was the only one going to Rochester. The aid worker said that his new family would be waiting for him there. On the plane to Rochester, most of the passengers were men traveling on their own, but there were some women too, and a few families, mothers and fathers and children. Most of the people were white. Beginning at the airport in Frankfurt, Salva had seen more white people in the last few hours than he had seen before in his whole lifetime. So again, major shock for him. He's leaving the country that the only home he ever really knows, Africa, traveling to the United States. And he says over this journey from Africa to the United States, he's seen more white people than he's ever seen in his lifetime. He tried not to stare, but he couldn't help studying the families closely. Thoughts kept looping through his mind. What if my new family isn't there? What if they have changed their minds? What if they meet me and they don't like me? Salva took a deep breath. A step at a time, he reminded himself. Just this flight. Get through this flight. The plane landed at last, its wheels screeching, while Salva gripped the armrest and braced himself for what was to come. So here he is, 22 years old, but still so unsure. He's in this new land, meeting new people.
Well, you would be if this.
Absolutely. I don't blame him one bit for feeling the way he's feeling. Anytime we're in a new situation, don't we wonder, what's it going to be like? Are people going to like me? Are they going to want me there? I'm so different than them. Is that okay? When we feel that way, don't we?
Thankfully, however, I'm pretty sure this is far enough from segregation.
Yeah. Well, and the family that has brought him to them, the family that had requested him to come to New York, they knew about him. They had read about him. They had probably seen pictures of him. I think they probably had a little bit of an idea of what to expect. I mean, not, completely. You don't truly know someone until you meet them. But I think they had a little bit of some, little knowledge of him before he came. But he didn't have any knowledge of them. There they were, smiling, waving in the lobby. His new family. Chris, the father, Louise, the mother, and 4 children. Salva would have siblings just as he had before. He felt his shoulders relax a little on seeing their eager smiles. So he gets off the plane, goes to get his baggage, and he sees his family waving, and children He's like, siblings, I'll have siblings again. And they're eager and they're happy and they're glad to see him. And let me see if I can pull them up. Here. Okay, let's see if I can. I'm going to show you this picture of them. So here they are, Louise and Chris, and then the 4 children that he was coming into their family. This is Salva. And I'll have to go back and look at the date, like how old the children were when he came into their family. I'm not sure.
Can you put that link in the chat?
Yeah, this is a website called heartsonfire.org, and it has a lot of information about Salva and then Water for Sudan. But yeah, I'll put it in the chat for you.
I've seen that picture.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
And
I was
it
trying
talks-
to find. I was looking for his family, like
Yeah.
his before family, and then I saw that picture.
Yeah, so it talks a little bit about them and like when he in his journey, like when he got here. And then seeing his father again too. There's a little bit on there about seeing his father. Okay.
Well, why is he the one getting the recognition without all of the other people who survived this journey getting, the same?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jonathan. I think part of it is what he went on to do, like what he went on and how he overcame, and despite all the tragedy and all the loss and all the troubles that he faced, like what he went on to still do. I heard a quote the other day, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I really liked it. And it talked about, like, I'll have to try to find the exact quote, but it was something about it's easy to give up. It's hard to keep going. Like, it's hard to keep living. It's hard to keep trying. It's hard to keep working at something that's difficult for us. It's easy to give up. It's easy to just walk away. It's easy to just quit. It's easy to not show up. Okay, those of you that are here in class, those of you that are coming to class every day like you're supposed to and doing your assignments, you're showing up. You're doing it. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, okay? It's much easier to just turn your computer off and go hang out at your house, right? And say summer has started, school's over. But you're not doing that. And so sometimes we do hard things or things we don't care for because it's the right thing to do. Not always the easy thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. Okay, I just have like one more page and then this chapter we'll wrap it up. Salva said hello and thank you many times, for in his fatigue and confusion, these were the only words he felt sure about. So he's exhausted. He's been traveling. He's got so much on his mind. He's just exhausted. He could not understand what anyone was saying, especially Louise, who spoke so quickly that at first he was not sure she was even speaking English. So they were probably just excited to see him, just as excited to meet him. Oh my gosh, Salva, tell us this, tell us that. What can we do for you? What do you need? And he's just like, I don't, you just thank you. He kept saying because he didn't know what else to say. And yes, they did have more clothes for him. A big puffy jacket, a hat, a scarf, gloves. He put on the jacket, zipped it up. The sleeves were so bulky that he felt as if he couldn't move his arms properly. He wondered if he looked very foolish now, with his body and arms so fat and his legs so thin, but none of the family laughed at him, and he soon noticed that they were all wearing the same kind of jacket. The glass doors of the airport terminal slid open. The frigid air hit Salva's face like a slap. Never had he felt such cold before. In the part of Africa where he had lived all his life, the temperature rarely dropped below 70 degrees. When he inhaled, he thought his lungs would surely freeze solid and stop working. But all around him, people were still walking and talking and moving about. Apparently, it was possible to survive in such cold temperatures, and he now understood the need for the awkward padded jacket. So up until now, he was like,
Please,
"Why are we
this is
putting on all these clothes?" Yeah, but now he's like, okay, I get it now. Salva stood still inside the terminal doors for a few moments. Leaving the airport felt like leaving his old life forever. So as he's standing there, getting ready to take a step into New York, he feels like he's leaving his old life, Sudan, his village, his family. Tears came to his eyes, perhaps from the cold air blowing in through the open doors. His new family was already outside. They turned and looked back at him. Salva blinked away the tears and took his first step into a new life in America. And that's the end of chapter 15. So here he goes. He's still walking, isn't he? Different kind of path, different kind of walk, but he's still walking, and he takes that step outside of the airport into his first moment of his new life in America. Still brave as ever. I mean, he's nervous and unsure. What do you think? I mean, what do you think? Okay, if you're Salva, and let's pretend for a minute you are Salva. I'm going to stop recording this. And you get back to your new family's home in New York.